Hello, everyone. Ron Gerber with AngelBeat. So glad to have Brian Stevens, one of the key West Coast executives, gurus, solar energy experts with SolarEdge, joining me for this fireside chat. AngelBeat's making a big push in sustainability, clean energy. Solar is obviously critically important. SolarEdge is one of the industry leaders in this space. You may not know directly of SolarEdge because you may not see their name on the panels and things like that. But what I want Brian to cover in this brief chat is give us a little background himself, tell us a little bit of SolarEdge, $1 billion plus manufacturer of inverters headquartered in Israel, where there's such a wealth of technology. And maybe, Brian, you could share a little bit of your background, give a little bit more insights into SolarEdge, and then more importantly, talk about inverters, where they fit within a normal corporate or campus solar installation, and why inverters are so critically important in your solar energy efficiency.
Happy to do it. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So yes, my name is Brian Stevens. I am the regional sales manager for SolarEdge, focusing on commercial and industrial projects in the Southwest of the United States, right? So basically I focus, even though SolarEdge is a corporation, covers the gambit of types of solar installations, my focus is on commercial and industrial customers. So my background in the industry, been in about a little over 10 years. Majority of that was on what we call behind the meter or inside the facility type of demand management and automation and controls. Moved into energy storage, which obviously has a marriage with solar. And so that migration to working with a solar manufacturer like SolarEdge was pretty simple for me, right? So I've been with SolarEdge now for about 2 years.
Okay.
From a overall perspective of SolarEdge in the market, we are currently the #1 manufacturer of inverters in the world by revenue. A big chunk of that obviously is residential. We're a major player in the residential side, and we're growing now on the C&I ground mount utility side as well over time. Right, so that's our big push for 2023 is to become the #1 C&I manufacturer in the world as well.
Excellent. Now, an inverter, what specifically does that do, and how do you configure that to work with other components of a typical corporate or industrial installation?
Yeah, so there's from a layman's standpoint, actually, the easiest way to look at it is there are 3 kind of major components to a PV system. You've got the module itself, that photovoltaic system that's actually taking the sunlight and converting to electricity. You have the racking or mounting solution for that, right? Whether it's on a roof, it's on a ground mount, it's on the side of the building now even. So there's a number of ways to mount it, and that's a big part of the process. And then lastly, the inverter, which takes that electricity from the solar panel that's in DC, converts it to AC so that it can be either used in the facility it's connected to, or passed on to the grid, or sent into batteries for later use.
I see this huge picture of the SolarEdge complex behind you. I believe it's probably in Tel Aviv or one of the tech centers, Haifa, there in Israel. Maybe you could share some insights to a layman. What's so complicated? And I know it's very complicated. What's the big deal about making that DC to AC conversion so energy is useful? I know a lot of research and analysis is done on the efficiencies of the PV or photovoltaic cells themselves. But if your inverter isn't efficient, all of that capability isn't worthwhile. So maybe give us a little better insight. What are the engineers doing inside that building? That's really the secret sauce that established SolarEdge as the inverter leader.
Gotcha. So that question is a much deeper rabbit hole than you think, but we'll keep it high level. And so the differentiator from SolarEdge's standpoint is how you take that process of converting electricity from a simple box that literally, like we talked about, just converts DC to AC, and then also the control of the voltage, the safety of the solution as a whole, and the overall production, right? So what SolarEdge does is it actually separates that functionality into 2 parts. And we have the physical box, which is like everyone else's inverter, that communicates to the grid and converts that electricity. And then we have a smaller device called an optimizer, which sits at the actual module level. So that gives us a little bit more control than standard inverters, meaning we can see everything that's happening all the way down to the module level. And that also allows us to mitigate the impact of poorly performing modules. And that's a big part of what SolarEdge does. I mean, it's funny, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, like I said, the basis of our company and the IP was actually with satellites, right? So we originally developed the optimizer to optimize current on a satellite to get maximum performance out of modules there, right? And so that if you did have a damaged or faulty performing module on a satellite, it didn't affect the rest of the modules, right? So it was very important in that fact, because you can't really do a truck roll out to a satellite, right? Yeah. So
that's a great analogy, because in space you're not plugging into the wall. That's the ultimate island. You're dependent critically on solar power. There's nothing else in space, and so you can see why that track record of success in keeping the lights on in outer space and, at the orbiting satellites, and that's how you develop the patented technology to make that work. And I imagine it is obviously not so simple when you've got to deal with all the variations, you've got to deal with all the complexities of cells performing or not performing, and how do you ensure it's not as much the physical process. I'm sure it's all the software, the algorithms to analyze all the activities on that panel to make sure that the overall efficiency of the system is optimized. That's what we heard a lot of people when you spoke at our Angel Beat event say. We focus as much on the inverters and the efficiency of them as we do on the panels. I mean, there's been so many great efficiency gains in PVC that the delta between various manufacturers isn't as critical. And what really gets organizations, the ROI, the performance benefits, comes as much from the inverter as it does from the next generation PV technology. Is that a reasonable summary?
From our standpoint, it is, right. So when you talk about the difference between SolarEdge and what we consider legacy string inverters, that's the big difference, right? Two major things when it comes to end users and the people that actually are the beneficiary of a PV system. And so normally I'm talking to installers, EPCs who would then talk to a commercial client and say, here's a design and solution that will do X, Y, and Z for you, right? So I'm selling to them most times. So when I get to talk to end users, that's where I talk about safety and performance, because that's really the big differentiators for SolarEdge. And with regard to the off-taker of the energy, as we call it, that's where they see the biggest benefit. One, they never have to worry about an accident, jeopardizing their own people locally, as well as any first responders of any kind of emergency having to go on the roof for any reason. And then on the production side, again, because we have that module level visibility, we know we can negate those underperforming modules so they don't affect the rest. And generally, we get 2 to 3% more production on an annual basis from year 1, and up to like 5 and 6% by year 20 of a sizable PV system.
Got it. And single-digit performance gains may seem on the surface not that much, but when you're talking about the price of energy, given current conditions, given the cost of capital, that's a huge benefit. And plus, it also promotes sustainability. It insulates organizations from any volatility. I know, with all the tragedies going on in Europe, we've got forest fires on the West Coast shutting down things. This is critically important. And if organizations put in your platform, they can be further resilient and further sustainable because they can keep their operations going, even if it's 5% of a day. What's that? That's that basically means you're running another hour free every day with your technology versus someone else.
Yes, and beyond that, from a safety standpoint, what people don't think about is when that inverter stops working, or if you no longer have power from the grid, right, and your inverter shuts down for that reason, that doesn't change what the solar panel is doing. That solar panel is still taking the sunlight, converting it to electricity, and all those wires coming down to that inverter are live, right? So if for some reason you have to go up on that roof or in that field, like for on a ground mount, you're in the midst of high voltage wires. So having the ability to curtail at the module level is really key to safety and a big component of our product.
Another thing you mentioned, and I was thinking about this, was your relationship a little further upstream with engineering firms, installers who have to specify their product. Maybe you can comment a little bit about SolarEdge's history, more consumer, now getting more in the corporate B2B world. I would imagine consumer installations are much harder. Consumer roofs are much different. I've got a slate roof, it doesn't work. You've got slants. So many industrial facilities have a relatively standard roof. They're triangular. You don't see these fancy windows that you got to worry about. And so I would imagine that your history in supporting the consumer side and some of the challenges of doing installations correctly on that really benefits SolarEdge as you're expanding into the industrial space.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the benefits basically are exponentially bigger at the residential level on the commercial side. So for instance, because we have that module level component, right, we're not impacted by things like shading or weird slants. And so you can have modules on the same string that are on different eaves even, right, where with a standard inverter you couldn't do that, right? So those benefits that are smaller on the residential side, yes, means you can do a little bit more on someone's roof than normally could, but when you're talking about the landscape of a ground mount that's undulating and the cost of grading that so that, all of the things can be level and air conditioners all on top of a facility that cause a little bit of shade throughout the day as the sun goes across, yep. Right? All those are mitigated when you have module level type of monitoring and optimization. So a standard string inverter, if you get a little bit of shade, you've got to move those modules away. You've got to install fewer modules. So your system on the same roof with an older legacy string inverter can't be as big as it could be with SolarEdge.
So now that I'm much more informed, and I'm sure everyone listening to it is, it's not surprising that SolarEdge is $1 billion corporation, the market leader. Makes perfect sense. So when you look at, what are some of the new things on the horizon with SolarEdge as you're looking to expand your inverter technology, maybe complement it with other solutions and products?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, a big push for us going forward is on the C&I side, that commercial industrial. So our new 120 kW inverter platform, we're adding larger sizes coming up as well that will support the ground mount market. We're really going to be focusing initially, so for 2023 and beyond, 2023 especially, we're going to be focusing on that small utility, large ground mount or community solar. So as you know, community solar is getting huge, especially on the East Coast. That's going to be a big area for us going forward with, again, that optimization ability for these. So when you talk about, megawatt size systems, now you're talking about millions of dollars of difference over the life of the system, to the point where when we're talking to asset owners, the large banks and the large investors in solar, when we tell them, when we do a side-by-side comparison looking at that production over 20 years, they realize pretty quickly that even if free, no capex at all, they were still financially better off going with SolarEdge based on that production alone, sure. Right? So it really stands out when you're talking about megawatt, 2 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 50 megawatt type systems.
So as you're going from the consumer to small industrial and now to large scale industrial, building on your strength, building your expertise, that 5-6% gain suddenly translates not to 5, 6. Now you're in 7 and 8 figures, and you're building up. I'm not sure the exact criteria. The ability of the SolarEdge inverter to handle bigger and bigger incoming power and do that efficiently is only going to make it more critically important for those of you out there. Make sure you specify SolarEdge. It's good for the environment. It's good financially for your company, and I would imagine it's one of the best things from a career enhancing move when you can showcase to your boss and the CFO of organizations how much money you saved. I'm sure all those things come together. Are there any new products that SolarEdge is complementing? I know we talked earlier about trackers. Maybe describe that a little bit, or even how you're trying to, even as you work with so many different battery sources, is that another area of growth? Maybe you could talk about other add-ons that can complement the inverter technologies.
Sure. Yeah, so on the residential side, we already do have an energy storage solution,
Okay.
which is a very powerful product and can help customers, manage their home. And in fact, we're getting more into a whole home holistic, consumer approach that they'll be able to control a lot of things. Your EV charger, your your battery, your solar, and all be able to do that from your phone, right, from your smartphone. So that it's very powerful from the homeowner standpoint. And when we look at all that, and you talk about a homeowner and saying, hey, you'll have all these great benefits and it'll have a payback of X. And then on the commercial industrial side, you have all these benefits, and this is an asset that's going to be worth X millions of dollars, right? So the language changed slightly from a payoff and freedom from the utility on the residential side to major valuable financial asset on the commercial industrial and utility side, right? So it's a different conversation, but we're kind of gearing it that way or pushing it in those directions on both sides. From a new product standpoint, go ahead.
No, I bet, and I've seen this a little bit just personally drawing from my own residential system. We're putting in EV chargers in a house. We have a separate conversation about SolarEdge for my own personal home. But when we talk to real estate brokers, they're saying the value of residential homes goes up substantially if it's not just interest rates that determine the value. If you can say, not only do you have EVs installed, but you have batteries and solar installed in your home, so that home is worth more because the energy cost is less. I've heard the same thing from property owners, real estate investors, and they're saying to ensure that our property is worth the maximum value, and in turn, so we can charge the maximum rents to tenants, if we can showcase this incredibly efficient system where, I don't know, it looks like SolarEdge, it's got to be at least 10-story building there, I'm not sure. When you're showcasing this as an example, I'm sure when real estate brokers are showcasing their buildings, they want to say, we have SolarEdge inverters, because they might talk, well, we've got the latest 1 gig internet, but I'm sure they're going to showcase, we have all these inverters in place from SolarEdge because we're going to make your utility bill less, and that's a big benefit. It'll save you less. Maybe they can upsell the rent a little bit because net it's still cheaper for the tenants. But I have to believe, those kind of decisions and assessments are all critically important in driving success of SolarEdge in the C&I space.
Absolutely, and a big part of my job is having conversations with REITs, real estate investment trusts, and other owners of commercial real estate property. Because yes, you have this value of doing any type of energy efficiency, whether it's solar or on-site, lighting, everything that reduces your operating costs. Therefore, increases your net operating income. Therefore, increases the value of the property if it's a commercial real estate investment property that you're renting out space, right? And so, having that conversation and discussing when I take, especially if they even have a triple net lease where they don't get the initial benefit, you can raise the rent commensurate with that savings, right? And so you can transfer that savings so that you're sharing it with your tenants, and now substantially increasing the property value of your property. Which then you can use to invest in new properties, things like that. So the growth potential just from adding solar on a real estate investment is it's almost exponential depending on where you live, right? In San Diego, which is where I live, where you have a cap rate of 6%, every dollar is a substantial increase in the property value that you improve net operating income. So yeah, having those discussions are critical from my standpoint as well with end users that have properties.
Well, we encourage everyone to hear more from Brian and his team at future Angel Beat programs. You can always go to #AngelBeat, angelbeat.com or SolarEdge.com. We'll put you in touch with Brian. We encourage everyone to take advantage of this. As I look at this, and we deal with a lot of financial investors, real estate executives, the key takeaway is you have to focus as much on the inverter than anything else. I think the analogy of tires are fine. You might get the fastest car with the best brakes impossible, but if those tires slip and squeal, if they continually have flats, if they can't brake on a timely basis, the really expensive sports car you bought is not going to work that well. And I think that's a key thing. And I think as you're looking at this, the other good thing about SolarEdge, and we don't need to go through all the PVC manufacturers and other people like that, they work with everyone. So it's with very few exceptions. So, you can talk with Brian, and when you're specifying your product, again, there are lots of components in solar. You need the panels, you need the racking system, you probably need a tracking system, which Brian alluded to, where SolarEdge can help you orient the panels so they capture light most efficiently depending on the season and depending on the time of day. There are key solutions. As I said, I think it's incredibly powerful technology that all of you need to look at carefully. Everyone's going to solar. It's just, do not underestimate the value of inverters as you're making your final product specification decisions. Anything else you want to add, Brian?
Yeah, just to add to that point, also when you think about what's going to happen next in the solar industry, right? Our one thing that we pride ourselves is being able to future-proof, solutions that, for instance, panels haven't made a dramatic change recently, but they have added that bifacial component now. So now your panels have silicon on both sides, right? So you can capture some little bit of sunlight that's reflecting off the ground, whatever, on the back, right? You maximize the performance of systems like that with SolarEdge because, again, we're doing that module level type of optimization. So now things like bifacial, whatever is coming out next, I guarantee you it could impact the performance of a module. And anything that impacts the performance of a module also impacts the performance of the modules around it, right? And when you have that kind of fluctuation, you want to maximize the difference between those and not be impacted by them instead. So that's, again, where SolarEdge stands out. So we can help future-proof you against, dramatic changes or improvements that you want to take the benefit of in the future.
My key takeaway, if it's good enough for NASA,
yeah,
and that, and there is probably no better reference customer than the space shuttles, all the other satellites, and everyone's putting in place, billionaires going into space. But if SolarEdge is good enough to keep solar systems working efficiently and safely, because the other thing, and Brian alluded to it before, God forbid 1 billion times that you have an electrical short or some kind of safety issue with your solar system in space. That would be catastrophic. So we appreciate your time. Look forward to having you speak at future events. And again, we've got lots of resources available. Contact me, contact Brian. Want to make sure you analyze and understand the inverter technology so you can get the biggest bang for your buck from your solar installation. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.